Okay, we were talking about the starfish and the spider and how easy it is to kill a spider versus how easy it is to kill a starfish as it can morph and adjust. Another book that came out similar time period, and this one came out in 2000, was The Birth of the Chaotic Age. And in that book, the author argues that Huck does that we can wed chaos and we can wed order together. We can wed those two together and form this kind of a hybrid out there, which allows for more consensus decision making rather than top down or bottom up. So he makes this conclusion here, this little quote that we included. To the degree that you hold purpose in common among you, you can dispense with command and control. Now that's a major line right there. We need to catch that one. Is the purpose understood and agreed with, and then backed? If that can happen, then you can. His argument is you can dispense with command and control. People will know how to behave in accordance with them, and they'll do it in thousands of unimaginable creative ways. So here's your theory why, with a strong opinion about followership and its ability, that it's not there to take advantage of a leadership, it's there to do its job. And if it knows what the purpose for their existence is, turn them loose, let them go, and you will get what you need to do. Probably in ways you never thought about, but it'll get done. So that's what he's arguing. We can wed chaos and order together. But that takes, and that assumes then a very high view of the followership and the workers that are there. Okay, so anyway, that's just another one that you can be familiar with, making kind of the same argument, arguing very strongly for a theory why. We looked at this yesterday too, the postmodern organization, what leadership requires. And definitely one of the things that it requires is that you have to be able to think fast, forget fast, and be able to work in a multicultural, international settings, deal with multicultural cultural settings, and be able to adjust very, very fast, make quick decisions, and yet hopefully good decisions. Followership, you're going to be expected to sell yourself, to bring something that's your specialization to the table, and that makes you a credible player, and that people will want you. Some of the costs are probably you're not going to be having a job for life. You'll be doing some jobs, and then you'll be moving on doing other jobs. And so the whole area of long-term relationships, it gets a little smeary and messy at this point as well, because you're with people for a certain period of time, then you're moving on and so forth. So there is a cost involved in personal relationships. They can, of course, be done through the internet and so forth, but not face to face per se. Two of the major key elements then, and we'll look at this from each of the four perspectives and identify those key elements. For structure will be then goals that set out for the organization, because every group is put together to accomplish something in some way. And then they'll do that by establishing various roles and putting people in positions in those roles. And then there are rules that are applied now to how you implement and work through the structure. And the structure helps give control to get the goals, is what the structure is designed to do. Okay, here's your first quiz for today. This was taken up at CTEC, and this is the U.S. ambassador to China, Gary Locke. And what is wrong with this picture?
This caused a controversy in the Chinese press, I remember.
Yes, it did. It caused big controversy in the Chinese press. Speak up nice and loud because of the, yeah. Yeah, it caused big controversy in the Chinese press. Why would it do that? What would cause that?
In China, an official as high-ranking as him would never buy their own coffee. They would send some.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Why would you buy your own coffee? You know, there's roles, right? Back to structure. There are certain roles and ways to play those roles. Gary Locke is not playing the role from the Chinese perspective. He's buying his own coffee. There's one more thing in that picture. What else is he doing?
He's carrying his own bag.
He's carrying his pack, yeah, his backpack, right? Isn't that that's a very Western thing to do, though, right? So I mean,
He's the ambassador from U.S. to China.
yeah, correct. Mm-hmm.
China, they were very unaccustomed to seeing him carry his own bag.
Yeah.
His own coffee.
He's buying his own coffee and he's carrying his own pack.
Where is he?
I don't know where he's at now.
Was this a problem for the American Chinese who
Carry
started
your
taking
bag.
off?
No.
It's actually worse.
Like, sit here.
In Chinese culture, it's actually worse when the guest has to go through those things.
But
Yeah,
this is taken. This picture taken in the United States, right?
In SeaTech, yes, in Seattle. Mm.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
So
The airport there.
somehow this got back to the Chinese.
Yeah.
China.
Somebody got a picture of it and then it went viral.
So the problem is shame for him or shame for themselves because the guest to China would have to do that?
Yeah.
I don't think it's both.
What?
He wasn't a guest in China at this time.
No, he was the U.S. ambassador. Yeah.
It was just the concept that they were so shocked about.
Yeah, but like a guest, like he's a representative
Mhm.
for them or to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Here was one of the things that you could pick up. This is something unbelievable in China, said Tang, a Chinese American citizen. Even for low-ranking officials, we don't do things for ourselves. Someone goes to buy the coffee for them. Someone carries their bags for them. So that was some of the things that created. I mean, he's too Americanized. I mean, this is what we do, right? You buy your own coffee, right? I mean, nobody went over there and got my coffee for me this morning. You know, I had to go over and get my own. So.
I thought Ivan was going to take care of you.
Yeah, I know. It's a.
Don't show that video.
Yeah. Could you stand up, Ivan, and get your face on the video there so we know who you are?
I'm already in shame.
All right, so that's the roles and rules that come along with structure. Yeah, and you know, people have from different parts of the world look at that and see it from very, very different light. But for the Chinese over there, it created no small stir. It also includes task and time, so there's usually time element pushed onto it. So deadlines are in place to get something done. There's also reflection on an analysis of the material that's produced, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And then there's reorganization if there's a problem. So back to the thing. If there's a problem, what do? Change the structure. That'll solve the problem. Leaders tend to be very analytical, and they tend to be well organized, and that's what got them into those positions usually. Sometimes you get some that are not into that mode. And followers need clear directions. That's the assumption behind that they really aren't going to do it. Unlike the previous text, the chaotic age, where you can wed chaos and together with, you know, this is so different than that. This assumes that followers do need direction, do need help. They're not smart enough, wise enough, and strong enough to be able to get these things done. So there has to be a top-down. While we're on that little flow chart over there, which is very, very typical, almost every organization has one of those, whether it's put it out in a visible format or just hidden away somewhere in somebody's file. Usually there is one that exists. And what those do, organizational charts do, is show what? they show the formal lines of how authority is to run and how communication is to flow. And this one, of course, it's basically the top down is what it's showing here in this type of a format. So it'll show you your major divisions, it'll show you the communication flow, but it does that all on a formal level. The only problem is what this does not show is the communication flow on the informal level. And that's probably more important than the formal, how communication flows on the formal level. Because why? Everybody has their own little groups, right? And when something comes down the tubes, there's all kinds of communication flowing back and forth. And we're not talking now up and down, we're talking on an informal level, and that's where things really start to happen. So looking at organizational charts tells you only the formal side of it. What we have to recognize is that there's also the informal side, and it's probably very, very wise for any leader to know what are the informal communications going on here. Who's talking to who? You'll be able to figure that out. Who goes to breaks with who goes to lunch with who. These type of things will start to tell you the informal social networks that are in place. And we need to know those just as strongly as we need to know the formal side of it. Okay, tell me now, what are some of the advantages or disadvantages of the structural frame? Because as we noted before, as Bowman and Deal noted, they come with strengths and they come with weaknesses. So identify some of those, what those would be.
There's clarity in roles.
Ah, very clear, yeah. There's a chart there. You know who's who. Lots of clarity, good. What else?
Even if, one of those roles gets, one of the people exits one of those roles, you can kind of, adjust for that very easily, knowing, who's where, you can shift people accordingly.
Yeah.
In that. So it has its flexibilities.
Yeah. Flexibilities in placement, knowing who to put where, yeah. Because the roles are clear, so we can put people into those places. Good. What else? Doesn't matter, either side. Advantages, disadvantages, limitations, either side.
Another advantage would be just the predictability of what's going to happen.
Yeah, it provides a lot of security because it's very predictable. Lots of security there in that type of a format. You know what's going on, so it's predictable. Good, excellent. Good deal.
One of the limitations definitely would be that it limits people to their stated role.
Yeah,
Their contributions in other areas that they might be gifted in aren't really appropriate.
Yeah.
Since it's not their role.
yeah. So it can limit one's actually using some of their gifts and skills, yeah. Because you're plugged into a certain set, yeah. Excellent.
It can also limit relationship.
And how?
Because, especially if a structure like that exists in a hierarchical
Yeah,
society, the bottoms can't relate with the tops. The tops wouldn't relate with the bottoms.
uh-huh,
So there might be some limitations there.
okay.
If like anything were to happen out of the ordinary, if anything changes in the environment, then all of a sudden they don't know what to do anymore.
If it doesn't fit that structure, yeah, now what do we do? Yeah, yeah.
Well, the people seem to serve the structure.
Mhm.
People seem to serve the system. And so this structure or the doesn't seem to, it doesn't adjust that easily.
Yeah.
The people have to adjust towards that.
Yeah.
So really, it's more the people are assimilated into the system,
Mm-hmm.
and because
Mhm.
it's much more monochronic.
Yeah.
It's very time oriented,
Yeah.
very linear,
Yeah.
and therefore that's why the relationships
Yeah.
may not be too into.
Mhm.
It's not high value, even if it says it is. Even if they say, even if the symbol says, the symbols say, oh yeah, we're about people.
Yeah.
But really, they're just they're a cog in the system.
A cog in the system.
One of the other advantages might be that when you look at a structural framework, especially like that kind of flow chart,
Yeah.
you really know where and who has power and where
Yeah.
it kind of lies.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
and who you should be friends with.
Yeah. Yeah, who you, who you better be friends with if you want us to get something changed or done. Yeah. You know where the power lies. Yeah.
But it's easy accountability.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah.
So that's an advantage, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
One of the limitations might also be if you do want to get something done, you need to go to the person who is over you.
Ah.
Then needs to go to the person who's over them.
Yeah.
Then needs to go to the person. So it can also be I guess a limitation when it ends up being kind of a bureaucracy
Yeah.
to get things done until you get to the person who has the power to say yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Time to work it through the system, the bureaucracy. Yeah, it just, yeah. That changes the whole thing, yeah. And that's why some of the reactions to go flatter, right? Because of the bureaucracy and the time it takes to do that. Why put up with that? Spread it out, let the decision making be down on lower levels, and more people have input into that decision making and get it that way. I mean, at Biola, how long does it take to make a decision on the artwork out here on the wall of the Jesus artwork on the wall out here? You know, that took years to work it through. Everybody having little groups to get together and talk about it and discuss it and let it work its way back up through the system, and then the president finally makes a decision on it. But it takes a long time.
Depends too on what kind of what kind of system that structure exists in.
Ah.
If it exists in a democratic structure, then yeah, it takes long.
Yeah.
But if it exists in like a strong leadership structure, like a dictator,
Yeah.
I mean, even in France, I think social democracy like that, decisions can be made quicker.
Phew.
Or like China.
Yeah.
This needs to get done, so we're going to do it. So I think it depends also on what sort of system that structure is.
There you go.
So actually, decisions could be quick here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's but it's not. It's still top-down decision making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily need to be slow.
Yep. And that just shows you the different types of structure, even within hierarchy, that are out there. That the Biola hierarchy is slow in many cases. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can still have hierarchy that does speed it up. Yeah. Super. Okay, there's some of the advantages and disadvantages of it, because they do come with strengths and weaknesses. Okay, what is the big, dark sin of structure? What is its evil if left to just do its own thing?
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Oh, there you go. Lord Acton, there we go.
Depends on what.
Uh-huh.
It can become the end itself.
Ah, become the end in itself. Yeah.
And serve a greater purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's more of a structural issue, but it puts a lot of pressure on those on top
Okay.
to be able to make good decisions. I mean, I'm not saying that a non-flattened structure is sinful. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it puts a lot of pressure on the leadership to be able to make equitable, non-hierarchical decisions
Yeah. Yeah.
for the people, especially those on the more grassroots levels.
Yeah.
It's difficult. Not only is it difficult, sometimes impossible, because you have so many layers of experience based on the layers of structure,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore one could not really, take the perspectives of those on top. It's very difficult for them to see the perspective of those on even one or two layers
There's down. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess you would call it. What would you call it? One word or two. It's not the most. I guess it's not the most equitable system.
Mm. So equitable. What else would you say? The big dark sin of the structure.
Maybe even like in a Christian context, you depend more on, depending more on the structure, there's more on Christ, to get things done, to make decisions, or even, looking to the head of, the group is kind of key, like impetus for what you ought to do or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you rely too much on the system, like you were saying,
Mm.
it's an end in itself rather than
Yeah.
a means to
Yeah.
the ultimate end.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that process, what happens to some of the people down below? Get pretty ground up. Get pretty ground up. But it gets done.
Yeah, where the ultimate task ends up to be the task that is completed.
Yeah.
The ultimate goal is the task that is completed. And one has to wonder if that is the appropriate goal in every situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Bowman and Deal would argue it's one of the appropriate goals. So in other words, not buying into it as an end in of itself, which is to me one of its sins if it goes that direction. But it's just one of, in this case, 4 possibilities. Super. Okay. Key thing here then for us is that leaders and followers always are playing within structure somewhere, some kind of structure. They're always having to deal with structure, from very hierarchical, very dictatorial, to very flat, somewhere in between, bottom up, top down. There's always some structure in which you have to operate. So then the key question for the 2 teams, what does the structural frame reveal about Interact? And we'll leave that, of course, as a rhetorical question for the moment. That will be one of your things that you will look at. All right, let's move to the human resource frame. And in this part, we want to define it, look at its pathways, look at its procedures, and then how it relates to leadership and how it relates to to followership. And then start once again asking the cross-cultural questions. What are the implications of this human relations from the cross-cultural perspective? So basically, what Bowman and Deal will argue here in relation to human relations is that every organization has a need. That's why it came into existence. But every person that participates within that organization also has needs. So how do you bring fit to the organization, what it's set out to do, and the individual that becomes a member of that organization? How do you bring fit so that we get a win-win situation for both? And that's what's behind that. So some of the basic assumptions that they will argue for the HR frame is that organizations exist to serve human needs, not vice versa. Okay, this is almost the antithesis of what we saw in structure. The structure exists to get the goal, and we'll use the humans to get that goal. This reverses that and says, no, the organizations exist to serve human needs, not vice versa. And the second one, then, the organization and people need each other. So the organization can't get anything done if you don't have people. So, and the people can't get, really to use their gifts and skills in a communal way to get things done if they're not working together in that company per se. So, in that organization, I should say. So how do we bring those two together? They need each other. And that will produce synergy. When the two come together, you get synergy, and it creates outcomes that are desirable for both sides. The third one then, when there's a poor fit between the individual and the organization, one or both will suffer. Now we go back to our Kelly's alienated followers, pragmatist followers, conformists, and all that kind of stuff. Because if somebody is not happy within an organization, what happens? They just kind of put in their time, or it can get to the place where they become very destructive, right? And say, I'm going to get even here. And it can go even to what we just had happening up in Big Bear here with killing cops and so forth. When you have disgruntled workers, many things can happen like that. The destruction of property to killing of the president or HR people or whoever offended the person. Or it goes just underground and you just put in your time. So back to Kelly's, all his descriptions of various types of followers that are out there. And when that happens, of course, the organization cannot meet its objectives. It'll be moving along, but it's be clunky. It's like not a round tire, it's a square or octagon tire, just clunk, 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 It's not operating the way it could be operating. But when there's a good fit, both will benefit. Organizational goals are accomplished when the workers accomplish their goals. So there's that, bringing the unity between the two and trying to make both winners out of this whole thing. And the last one then, people work on their own needs as well as the needs of the organization. So there's allowance for things to happen in there. And any good organization also does what? It provides training for their personnel to keep them up to speed, either internally or they send them out to go to this seminar, go to that thing, get updated on this program or whatever to help them. And so they're growing in their capacities, and then that just comes back and accelerates the capacity of the organization. So people work on their own needs as well as the needs of the organization. So good organizations are going to be helping internal growth of their personnel, which does what? That says that probably some money is going to have to be used to set aside here to do that. And that can tell you a lot about an organization, how much funding is used to build up their personnel, either inside or outside, however they do it. So there's your two then theoretical expressions that we've been looking at. The top-down, which is, we're very familiar with that, and it does come in a number of different models. And some of the assumptions, of course, behind that is what? That people need guidance. People don't have quite what they need, so we provide that input so that they can get it. And as we've looked at the strengths and weaknesses of that, we looked at examples of that as well. Now this one, this is the top-down model as perceived from those on the bottom. Now you'll have to look at that and study that a little closely to catch that. The further down you are, you don't need any words. Yeah. Yeah. No words are needed to explain that. And of course, the other side is the bottom-up one, where the congregation, in the congregational church, for example, the membership basically tells the leader what to do, and the leader is there to fulfill that. And that comes with its strengths and weaknesses, as we've seen as well. So the big question is, and this could be worth an A here, which is the most biblical model? All right, now that we've solved this problem.
That's grad school connection.
Yeah. A little summary here with Theory X, based definitely on positional power, based on rules, right? And the pyramid, top down, task oriented, communications going top to bottom. And the leader's going to do the work here, define the roles, set the goals, plan the work, make the decision, provide the explicit direction, and then of course supervise what came out of that. So keyword, structure and control. Then the other side, the reactionary side, was let's emphasize personal power, and let's get from the bottom up, and let's focus on relationships rather than the task, and the communication can then flow in multiple directions. And the leader then is the listener, seeks input on roles, seeks input, works on work schedules, facilitates problem solving, delegates broadly, and fosters direct autonomy. Key words then: facilitate and support. It's interesting as I've looked at the what's happening in church planting in relation to my generation and former generations who go out into pioneer settings and start works. Well, then after a while, pretty soon it's the global South who's the strong one now, right? And which says what, whether it was done appropriately or halfway appropriately or inappropriately, Christianity did get spread, and now it's blossomed in all these places. And so what does a person do now in relation to church planting? Do you go into pioneer settings, or where do you work with the national churches that are there? How do you handle that, see? And then that's what brought the book up, then, the facilitator era, moving into that side of the role where you play within their arena. What do they need? What do they want? And how can you help them and assist them in what they do in relation to church planting and so forth. So definitely, as we've moved into the 21st century, the roles for church planting have moved. There's not, some Westerners will not do pioneer church planting. They will do that, but there'll be more of them doing work underneath and with the local churches wherever they happen to be internationally. So anyway, Theory Y is going to be, the facilitator is going to be a key role that Westerners will have to play. in this century here that we find ourselves in the area of missions. And as you've been talking here around here, going out without a job or going in there just showing up with your passport. This is the new era, right? That has brought, missions has moved on, and do we adapt to that and play into those roles, or do we take that dominant leadership role in the Theory X, or do you go into the facilitator role in the Theory Y? And the 21st century should be pushing Westerners very, very strongly into Theory Y. And hopefully with other kinds of means of earning a living that give you legitimacy within the countries of choice. Just one interesting thing on the positional power here, just to show how it can be abused. When we were having our problems there in the Philippines with our agency, when all the leadership was removed, remember we're plurality of leadership there, all the leadership was removed, and then other people were put in place for that, and then somebody from the outside was actually brought in to oversee that. Well, things were not going so well, so they brought over one of the leaders from the States here, who's, where basic decisions are made and they're carried out around the globe. And all the missionaries met together with him to discuss the issue. And he began with Hebrews 13, where the followers are to obey their elders. And he preached on that servant. And it was basically, after he was done with that, then he says, okay, are there any questions? But he set the stage by using his position and then using those verses to show what followers are to be in obedience to their leaders. The only problem was people sitting there did not think we were a church, so the context was a little different here, and so the questions started coming, and they were hot and heavy, okay? And so, but just using, there you have it, to me, abuse of power of using lining things out like that to say then basically don't challenge us, just follow us. And it didn't work, but those are the kind of things that can happen on the negative side of that. At what cost does each succeed? Well, there is cost on each sides of them, but as we've been noting, the blending, if we can blend some of those together in various settings like that, that will actually strengthen the organization. It'll strengthen the workers within the organization as well. The Japanese expression, of course, is the kind of the middle up and down. They kind of played in the middle role there. And, like any approach, it also has its strengths and weaknesses there. Theory Z, which you don't hear a lot about, but Japanese again, Ochi there, where basically you got in a job and your loyalty would give you the job for life. You had various roles that you were to play, and there's production that was expected. The morale tended to be pretty high, and because you were involved in that decision making along the way. So you weren't, it didn't just come from the top down. No, it came from the worker, and it went top and bottom. So you don't hear too much about that one today, but it's interesting. They use the geese and so forth flying like that, and the head geese does what? Breaks the air there, right? Which makes it easier flight for the rest of those that follow. And then the ones that are following, what are they doing? They're honking, right? And according to scientists, that increases your ability to fly for about 7% more with the cheering behind you like that. How they figured that out, I'm not sure, but that's what they say. Okay, so let's look at some of the key elements then in the human relations side of it. And the emphasis is definitely on communication, where feedback is central. And so what it's doing is respecting the workers that are there, and it's listening to it. So the ear is the big gate here to know what's going on within the organization. Having your ear to the ground and figuring it out. So, and then communication flowing in multiple directions. It fits the person with the organization goal. So that's what it's attempting to do. Building that person up, knowing where to place that person, and getting the max out of that person so that the goals of the organization is met, but doing it in such a way that the individual feels a very big part of the outcome of what's happening there, and feels responsibility and feels also rewarded for what they offer to the organization to get things done. And definitely it takes the power away from one individual, and basically is saying that, you know, much like the Japanese setting there, that you have, the individual has a lot of good stuff they can bring to the table, and we need to take advantage of that.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.